I'd like to welcome everybody today to actually a very special day on the calendar. February 18th is traditionally the day that we honor the death anniversary of Krishna. So that actually started a whole age, what we call Kali Yuga, over 5,000 years ago. But this February 18th is doubly special because it happens to also be on the lunar calendar, the day we called Maha-Shivaratri, Vigil Night of Shiva. And so it's kind of like this really, really sacred day today. And I'm so glad that for our topic of our inward eye, we have someone from the Hindu tradition who's going to speak with us. Peeyush Kumar has studied Shiva-based Hinduism and also many of the other traditions of the world. So he's really well-rounded as he approaches this topic. He's one of our beloved presenters here at Still and Moving Center, both at Miku Lenentine's meditations and here at Gems from the Wisdom Traditions. So this is maybe the third or fourth time I think that you've presented with us, and we're so pleased to have him. I do want to say that this is the year in our Still and Moving Center Almanac called Citizens of the Future. So that citizenry definitely takes a looking outward, deciding how it is that we need to best interact with the world. And I also think it requires for us to do that well, a turning inward. And so this topic of our inward eye, also sometimes known as the eye of Shiva, is what we're going to be taking up for our consideration today. So Peeyush Kumar, would you get us started, please?
Aloha, everyone, and aloha, Renee. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And it is also just lovely to be here. I'm here in Hawaii, as Miku was sharing, and I mean, it is special because I love coming here, and this time of the year, it is a little rainy, but it's still I love the rain. I miss the rain. Growing up in India, there's just always this sense of like going out in the rain is warm, and enjoying just the water falling on the skin and so on. And this is a special time to be here. And also it is good to see, Renee, that you're doing well. So thank you for organizing this and being here and welcoming us this way. Just this concept of Kashmiri Shaivism, this tradition of Kashmiri Shaivism is very special to me, and then this day of Maha-Shivaratri, there is a sense of energy around that as well that is special as well. And I would like to sort of give a little background of why I say that, and maybe with that invite you to also maybe connect with that energy that Maha-Shivaratri stands for as well. Essentially, just the first part of the Gems talk today is some of the concepts around the eye of the Shiva, or the inner eye, and then I would like to invite everyone into a sense of a kind of like a guided meditation, just to sort of help introduce this concept of the inner eye. It is not a conceptual topic, so to speak. It's a very experiential topic, and that's why I feel it'll be important for us to actually feel into that sense of what is this eye of Shiva when we talk about from this tradition, at least. So I would like to just get started by giving a broad idea of like what is Kashmiri Shaivism. I mean, Shaivism is Hinduism is actually not a religion. It wasn't a religion until people from the West came in, and then they wanted to understand the way of life, so to speak, for people, and they kind of grouped it as one religion. But if you are practicing Hinduism or you've been to India, you see just people have so many different ways in which they associate with their faith and with their traditions and so on. And one can look very different than the other. And it is also true. So Shaivism is a way of life. And it is not just one way of life either. There is a Kashmiri Shaivism, there is a whole other aspects of Shaivism as well. But I personally resonate with the concepts and the knowledge and the wisdom of Kashmiri Shaivism. And the reason for that is it's a very mystical tradition. And I believe, when we settle into that mystery, when we settle into that mysticism, then a lot of the ways of life that people around the world have, they kind of start blending into just this one sense of being. And every mystical tradition talks about non-duality, right? But it's not just non-duality. There is a sense of there is more than that. And Kashmiri Shaivism is a way, in which it actually articulates that in such a beautiful way, right? One of the things that I absolutely love about Kashmiri Shaivism is that it doesn't really separate anything away. Like there is no other in Kashmiri Shaivism. There is a sense of absolute, and the absolute contains all. It contains all that exists, all that does not exist. It contains the idea of being, the idea of infinity, and the idea of non-being as well. So there is a sense of absoluteness, and it's not a conceptual topic. There isn't a conceptual idea of what an absolute is. It's an experiential sense, I would say. And Kashmiri Shaivism says that the absolute being manifests here in the world by consecutively veiling itself in successive forms. And this is one of the most beautiful aspects of it. So what it means is that there is really no separation between me or anything else. All the challenges that I experience in life, it is in a way self-created. And it's a choice that I'm making to create those challenges so that I can interact with those challenges. I can have relationship with those challenges, maybe overcome those challenges if that's where it's going. And through that, experience the life as the way it is. So there is a sense of consecutively veiling oneself from this sense of absolute being into more and more limited forms. And for me, that just gives it gives so much compassion, first of all, just for the events that happen in life, the people that I experience in life. And it also sort of in a natural way imparts meanings to things in the ways they happen. It imparts purpose to things in the ways they happen. And also at the same time, it imparts a sense of that there is really no purpose, no meaning to be figured out. It is my own choice that I manifested this way, and I'm living the life that way. And so in Kashmiri Shaivism, they identify 36 stages of veiling, and they call it tattvas. So tattva, basically, the word tattva means tat means that, and twa means ness. So it's thatness. Essentially, it's an idea of identifying an aspect of a form, like something that one can associate, like either understand with something. There's like a sense of relational association with that. And it has 36 tattvas. So basically, the absolute being is called Shiva, and Shiva consecutively manifests itself in these 36 forms to limit itself, to experience the life in all its diversity and all its complexity and all its beauty. And that's basically a primer on Kashmiri Shaivism. Now, one of the key things that happens as Shiva veils itself in these consecutive forms is that there is a natural creation of world that happens. Now, absolute is absolute. It is infinite and it is beyond infinity. There isn't a sense of differentiation. Nothing is separate, nothing is distinct. It's all the same, and everything as well as nothing exists at the same time. But as Shiva consecutively starts veiling itself it creates worlds. It creates the space in which the world happens, and it creates the conditions in which the world can experience life, in which it, as the world itself, can experience life. And one of the things I want to also say is that, when I say Shiva, Shiva and Shakti are basically non-dual aspects of each other. And it's one cannot talk about Shiva without Shakti. And Shakti is the one really, I mean, in this, if we were to become more technical on this, Shakti is the one that really creates the energy, the primal vibration for these worlds to happen, for these worlds to be created. So this brings us to today, which is Maha-Shivaratri. So there are 13 Shivaratris in a year. It happens pretty much every month on the new moon. But today is special because today is the new moon in Pisces, and that is what Maha-Shivaratri is about. It is called the darkest night of the year. Typically, there's two darkest nights of the year. One is the new moon in Pisces and the new moon in Scorpio. And there's a reason it is called the darkest night of the year. There is a unveiling, so to speak, between the energies of the more liminal world, which in my other explanation, I would call the absolute sense of being, and then, where we are experiencing ourselves in a very finite way. So the veils between that become thinner, right? What that really means is that there's just an invitation for us to recognize a different timeline, maybe a different story, maybe a different relation, a different association with ourselves, with the world, to just maybe let go of some of these harder concepts and imagine that there's actually something entirely new is possible as well, But more specifically, it is a space which invites a primal energy, and I'm going to try to bridge a little bit with the astrological concepts here. The moon, the energy of the moon really is the fundamental energy that we hold within ourselves. It's the fundamental life energy that provides us basically the energy to be and live the life in the way we live a life, right? And the Pisces new moon essentially invites us to open that space into the sense of universality, to experience in a way universe within ourselves, and that is why it is called the Maha-Shivaratri, because Shiva in this sense is the absolute, and the new moon in Pisces invites us to maybe just open ourselves into this sense of absoluteness. At any point in time, there's two forces that are in play, specifically talking from this tradition. There's a force that is inviting us to become and assimilate into the absolute. And then there's another force that is inviting us to separate ourselves from the absolute to experience ourselves as this finite being. Again, this is, from a Shaivism perspective, this is again Shiva. There's two forces happening where Shiva is veiling itself to experience itself as an individual, and as well as the other side of the force where Shiva recognizes that Shiva is absolute, essentially. And I think 2 years ago, we actually did a GEMS talk on cycles, rhythms and cycles. And this is where it connects with. So, one of the first one is the force of the creation, and the second one is the force of grace, where everything dissolves and there's just an absolute oneness, so to speak. And what happens on this day is it just invites us a little bit more into that space of absoluteness. So, I like connecting stories. And one of the things about some of these ancient traditions and indigenous traditions is that they are just ripe with stories. So last year, again on Maha-Shivaratri, we actually talked about the love story between Shiva and Sati, or Sati is a form of Shakti. Today we are going to take that story and go into the next part of that story, and that will invite us to understand, the story behind Shiva's inner eye. And there's a lot of symbolism, and we will unpack that, in a pretty short amount of time, because it'll be it'll be good to actually get to that meditation where we can actually just experience that. So last year, we talked about how Sati immolated herself because she was not able to meet with Shiva, right? So after that, Shiva became indifferent to love, right? And again, Shiva is the absolute. Shiva is the creative force as well as the dissolving force. Shiva is the profound experience of love, as well as Shiva is also the profound experience of separation and aloneness as well. That's why Shiva has an image, where Shiva is meditating in the Himalayas alone, as well as Shiva has an image where he is in a love-making pose with Shakti. So it's all the extent of that. So when Shiva becomes indifferent to love, Shiva also becomes indifferent to life, and this is the aspect of Shiva which is missing the word here, which is basically devoid of life, which is sterile, is what I was thinking of. And in this space, Shiva is deep in internal meditation. The non-dual aspect of Shiva, which is Shakti, is all internalized. So Shakti does not exist externally. Now, what happens with that is the worlds are dying. There is a sense of desolation in the world. There is a sense of dread in the world, and the gods. So gods are always in favor of life, right? And Shiva is the absolute being. So Shiva is the god of the gods, so to speak, right? So the gods, essentially the gods of the rain, the gods of thunder, the gods of water, and so on. So they get together and they try to understand and try to come up with ways in which they can wake Shiva up from this very deep meditation that Shiva is finding himself in, and come up with a plan. And essentially, what they come up with is they ask Kamadeva. So Kama in Sanskrit means desire, and Deva is the god. So this god of desire, to go to Shiva and impart a sense of desire in Shiva. Now, this is also very symbolic, right? Shiva is devoid of desire at this time. And that's why he has no reason and no inspiration or motivation to actually externalize any of his energy. So Shiva, so Kamadeva goes and he shoots the arrow of love at Shiva, and Shiva is unfazed by that. Instead, Shiva opens up his third eye, and through that third eye, he burns Kamadeva into ashes. And that's a very symbolic sense here. So, and it's a very short story, and that's just the story. But let's unpack that a little bit. So, the third eye is associated with the concept of reflections. In Sanskrit, there is a word called Pratibimbavada, which is basically called theory of reflections. And essentially, what it says is that the absolute being is the absolute being, and we who embody Shiva, we always embody absoluteness, right? But when we are out in the world, what we actually see is the reflection of that absolute, and we imagine and we assume that reflection is all that there is, and we associate ourselves, we identify ourselves with those reflections, And that's how we, develop identities, and we develop, beliefs, and we develop all these aspects that make us human here. And essentially, the theory of reflection is essentially just that, really. It just says that there is an absolute that is getting reflected into our consciousness, and our consciousness identifies with these reflections. And through that identification is how we move in the world and how we create the world that we live in. And this, to really understand the concept of third eye, this idea of reflections becomes very important. And why is that? So, in many of these traditions, in many sort of meditative approaches, there is always a kind of like a goal to move towards the light, to understand the light, right? And light is not light necessarily just the light in the sense of what we understand as light. There is a quality to it as well, and that quality is of lightness as well. And that's what we are really trying to sort of bridge. There's a quality of lightness where we understand ourselves as being part of this universal flow, the role that we play here. And we can see ourselves in this universal creation, so to speak. And that's also a quality of lightness, because we understand that we are not separate, or we are not, different, and we are always in connection and in relationship with everything that is all around us. So in this sense, light is the process of knowing, and the light is also that which is known. And these are very mystical statements, right? So again, putting it in the concept of the absolute, what is known is the absolute itself. And no one can really, in their finite capacity, know absolute, right? But in a universal, in the sense of ourselves being the universal self, we know the absolute. And the process of knowing the absolute through the reflections is also that quality of light. And in this case, the third eye actually refers to the eye that it's not a physical eye, essentially. And to understand that, again, when we look out in the world, we cannot really see the air, right? But when I put my hand right on top, I can see my hand because of the reflection it causes, the light, the reflection that the light causes on my hand. In a way, it's obstructing the pathway of the light for me to actually see, the reflection of the hand that I have. Again, when I take my hand out and I look at the air, I cannot really see the air in there, right? So in this sense, what I'm drawing here is a metaphor. That hand is the metaphor of that reflection that is being created, and the air is the absolute in this sense. The other metaphor is the metaphor of the smoke. When there's smoke, I can actually see the reflections of the smoke, because the pathways of the light are blocked by those particles of the smoke. But the light exists beyond that smoke, and that's the absolute. So air in this sense is the metaphor for the absolute, and the smoke itself is the one that is being reflected, right? And so in this case, the physical eyes that we have is the smoke, and the inner eye becomes the air. And that is that's the metaphor that we're going to be working with, especially as we also go down into the meditation. Now, one of the things to understand here is that the reflections that we see are influenced by what in many of the Hindu traditions we call karma. So what is karma, essentially? Karma is all the beliefs, all the impressions, all the acts that we did or didn't do, accumulating over time and creating and influencing impressions and memories within us. It essentially imparts form and structure to this absoluteness, so to speak, to this absolute being. Now, the sensory eyes always picks up on the karma. How we perceive the world is defined by the impressions that we have that we have picked up about the world. Now, these impressions are the ones that impart things like right and wrong, good and bad, the discerning capabilities, so to speak, and that influences what we physically observe, so to speak. And again, I'm using the word physical also in a metaphorical sense, because in this sense, beliefs are also physical, right? And this is where the words become a little complex. So there's the subtle and there's the physical, and the subtle is this concept of the absolute, and the physical is anything that has form and structure to it in this way. Now, to be able to see everything, one has to see beyond the physicality of this. One has to see beyond this, beyond the smoke, so to speak. And the instrument that allows us to see beyond that smoke is the instrument of the inner eye, essentially. Now, scientifically speaking, people have associated inner eye with the concept of pineal gland. Many ancient traditions have depicted pineal gland as the concept of the eye, in Egyptian mythology and many of the native Indian mythologies as well. And of course, in this Indian mythology, it's referred to as the eye of the Shiva. And it's this experience of the inner eye that imparts us the nature of truth, so to speak. So what happens? What happens when Shiva opens up its inner eye? It destroys the world, right? It destroys desire. So the world is created by the physical eyes. The world is created by, the world is a world of forms, right? The world of ideas and beliefs. And we have created these ideas, this world of beliefs and forms and structures of discernments and judgments and all of those things. And all of these things serve a purpose. They provide us safety, and they provide us ways in which we can identify ourselves and experience and explore our creative self as well. How many times have we found ourselves lost when there's no guidelines and no structures, right? When there's just an infinite potential of creativity, but nothing comes in. But as soon as there is just the right amount of structure, it imparts enough creativity, enough inspiration for us to follow up on something. So all of the impressions, all the worlds that we have created, they serve a purpose. But there's also a point where they stop serving those purposes. And those are the point where we become compulsive, or we attach ourselves to these worlds that we have created. And that's essentially where the nature of the third eye comes in. So settling into that third eye, in a sense, opening up that third eye, destroys the worlds that are created. In Sanskrit, the term for the world is called sansar. And the opening of the third eye destroys sansar. Now, in many spiritual journeys, there's sometimes there could be this sense of restlessness, or a sense of wanting to get to that space that we say, is spiritually enlightened, so to speak, where the third eye is open. And again, third eye, is the inner eye. It's the eye that sees the nature of truth, right? And through many yogic practices or other practices, so to speak, one can push oneself to open the third eye sooner than their physical bodies are actually prepared for that. And that can also create challenges. Why? Because, we forget that that these worlds that we have created, they serve a purpose. And until we honor that purpose, the journey on this one can be overwhelming and destructive to the purpose that we actually started with. But there's also a spiritual reason for that as well. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking about impressions, which in Sanskrit is called sanskar. Very similar word, sansar and sanskar. I guess in the Western, like in English language, they call it samskara. So when we settle into a third eye, that settling is also informed by the impressions that we carry with ourselves, because there is no, this entire process is a process of continuous unveiling, so to speak. There is, as we remove one veil, there is another veil that is still there to be removed, and so on, right? And these samskar, these impressions, they still remain with us. And if we open a third eye, so to speak, quickly, then our bodies are actually prepared for that. Then these sanskar is the one that, these impressions are the ones that inform our experience of what that is, our experience of the truth. So it is still not the entire truth. And the truth that we actually receive, our bodies are not prepared for that, and that can create challenges for that. So there's always this sense of understanding the purpose of oneself in a given time and in a given space, and using that to influence or to inform us on what a path is. And every path, and again, this is again this concept of Shiva. Every path is the path of Shiva. So it's the saying of the Tao, right? There is nothing around the path. What is around the path is the path itself. Just the same thing of saying, same way, different way of saying the same thing. But essentially, this is just settling into the third eye, the sense of the pineal gland. And what this meditation is all about is that when the third eye is closed, the infinite being settles in the infinity. And when the third eye is opened, there is a definite focusing of the will. And this meditation one can experience by coming into the body oneself and focusing on the point right above the head center, which in many traditions is also called the cosmic mirror. And this is the cosmic mirror of impression. So not associating with the impressions, noticing how those impressions actually go. And these impressions are the worlds that we associate, that we experience. So I'll pause here. And maybe this is a meditation that we can, try after the call and open up for discussions and conversation.
Yes, that's really perfect. We do at the end, at the 4 o'clock mark, we leave the room open, and so anybody who would like to stay extra, let's make sure that we do that meditation with Peeyush. And so in the meantime, I wanted to really throw this open for everybody to share some experience that you have in your life of when you feel as if you've had this kind of openness to something interior. Peeyush mentioned activating the will through the opening of the third eye. So that's an interesting idea when you think about the will being something that's able to create. So if one is able to do this inward turning that also activates the will, imagine what could be brought into the world through this power. And at the same time, he talks about we don't want to be doing things like this too quickly. This isn't something to be done lightly, just for the fun of it. But maybe people already have experiences in their own life where they feel as if they've truly seen something, not just with the physical eyes, but realized something from within. So I'm kind of curious in people's experience along those lines.
Thank you, Peeyush. That was a wonderful presentation. I was thinking that this whole idea of the eye of Shiva, the third eye, can seem kind of unfamiliar, or we're not really used to it. But I had an experience today when I went into a restaurant and realized that the representation of the third eye is all around us. Because as I went into this restaurant, there was a large Indian family there, and all the women in the family had this dot on their forehead, bindi. And so millions and millions of women in the Hindu and the Jain and the Buddhist traditions have been wearing this representation of the third eye for thousands of years. And then likewise, as I went to the cashier and paid for my lunch, I noticed on the back of the dollar bill, there was a pyramid. And on the top of the pyramid was the third eye. So just in this one experience, I'm seeing the third eye kind of all around me. And I started thinking that even Jesus points to the third eye in the Gospel according to Luke when he says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And the Buddha also taught that, look inward, thou art Buddha. So it seems like we have this notion that God is outside of us. And if God is outside of us, then there can be other human beings that can be mediators between us and God. Whereas if the pathway to God is within us, then we chart our own course to it. And you pointed out that there's two forces in the world. There's the force of unification or inclusion, and then there's this other force of differentiation and separation. And it seems like the inward eye helps us move toward this sense of inclusion. So for me, Renée, my experiences of the inward eye are when I really feel connected or brotherhood with other human beings. I feel like at that point, I'm feeling this inclusiveness that I think is part of this inward eye.
There's also a sense of this inward eye, which invites us to a sense of inclusion, to open up a different pathway for exclusion as well. Because it's an act of will, and that act of will starts with dissolution, which is the inclusion aspect. But that act of will is an individual act of, it's an act of will that is carried by an individual, even though it's a universal will that is being carried. And through that act of will, one also starts separating themselves. So that process happens over and over and over again.
Elizabeth, I think you probably had experiences of your inward eye. Do you want to tell us about any of them?
Well, I was thinking. I was thinking again, as I have spoken in a previous session, of how I used to do a meditation to call in some of my other lives, to see whether I was doing my part in the joint exploration within the eternal now. And so I was kind of curious. Peeyush, is it?
Peeyush.
I was kind of curious. You seem to talk about a lack of purpose in life. And I wondered, don't we all choose each incarnation? And I wondered why you chose this one and whether you are interested in the relationship of this life to your other lives in any way.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. That's a very good question. And there's two aspects of it that come to me in this moment. So one is, the sense of purpose. The sense of purpose is a mental aspect, and purpose allows us to actually see a life in a longer timeline, in a ways of, as you're saying, incarnation and coming back into this incarnation, going through this life, and so on, in terms of like rhythms and cycles and so on. But also, moving away from the sense of purpose allows us to also experience life, any life, as an expression of the divine will, as an expression of a happening that is just happening, in a sense of this eternal now that always exists. Like there's no, the past, the present, the future, they all collapse into this one singularity of this one current moment. And when I say, for some people, the way they associate with their lives is without purpose, it's also a sense of realizing that whatever as we experience ourselves, it is in perfection in the now. It is in perfection with respect to this divine will. And so there is a sense of a story that we assign to that. Personally, for me, I love assigning purposes to my life, because that just helps me, helps my mind, so to speak, to make sense of like what this is all about. And there is a word that I connect with, and if I'm remembering it right, I think it comes from the ancient Egyptian language, and it's called Pohat, F-O-H-A-T, Pohat. There is a sense, what that translates to in a way is not too close, not too far. And there is also a Buddhist concept around that as well. And that's what I see my incarnation in this life to be, as an instrument of Pohat, so to speak, and as an instrument of not too far, not too close.
Do you make choices, and do you discern what's going on in your world, and then make choices on the basis of what you discern?
Yeah, indeed, all the time. But that discernment for me is a constant process of also surrender, to surrender to the divine will, to surrender to the part of me that is the absolute part. To the part of to the absoluteness of Shiva, and realizing that the Shiva chose itself to incarnate in this lifetime, in this very finite body, with all the previous incarnations, previous impressions from previous incarnations, and coming into this life in this incarnation. So
do those help you in making the choices, knowing something about them?
It does. It indeed does. In a way, it's a process of, we were talking about the inner eye, and the inner eye, there is a quality of fire to the inner eye, and it's a very directed fire. It's a fire that operates through the act of will. For me, the process of surrender also invites a fire, but that's a fire that dissolves everything around me, so to speak. So even though this is, like me as an individual being is making a discernment, a decision, but that discernment and decision is happening in this context where the surrender happens, because
Yes.
Otherwise I'm always playing this game.
I just want to say one more thing, Renee, if I
Is it about the third eye? Is it about the third eye, the inner eye?
Yes, but that's the inner eye. I mean, for many years in my life, I thought a higher power was always like telling me what to do, giving me my instructions, kind of surrendering to that higher power. And it took me a long time to recognize that that higher power is not disconnected from my own soul, is not disconnected from me. And that if I saw it as my own soul and took full responsibility for the orders I obeyed, that it works better for me.
Yeah. Yes. I think you're absolutely right. That does have to do with an inner seeing, to be able to perceive that finally. Yeah, because otherwise it is very outwardly directed when we're talking about the higher power, or whatever we might name it. Yeah, thank you so much. Other people who've had some experience with some sort of inner vision, something maybe you didn't know, and then somehow all of a sudden you did, and it activated something within you. I think falling in love is sometimes one of those things, when we really have that happen, when we have that experience on a really deep and meaningful level. I think there's something of that recognition. Oh, there that person is, or Maybe you've fallen in love with something other than a person. And there's that deep recognition. I've just found and fallen in love with my life path. Diana.
I'm kind of playing with it in my mind, the idea of surrendering to divine wisdom and divine love, but also being divine wisdom and divine love. And so when you were talking about absolute being a reflection and coming onto earth as a reflection to experience earth, it's like it brings it more, like you were saying, Elizabeth, it brings it together that we are divine love and divine wisdom. It is in, through, and around us and all it is. And I think for me, in meditation, when I sit quietly, I experience that oneness. And then I move in my life from that idea. And I was wondering, for me, looking at surrendering, do I surrender my ego? And then I thought that's all part of the oneness, it's like, but then it's like, for me, it's really listening. Part of my prayer at night is I surrender and I'm thankful for the guidance and grace. But I also realized it was really honoring that I am that oneness at the same time as I'm a reflection of that oneness. And how do we live our life as a reflection of oneness? What do we do in our daily life if we really deeply understand that we're a reflection of that divine wisdom, divine love, and divine in our life? How would we live our life differently? And with Mary, I think of you with faith and trust. It's like you surrender, and this is my perception of you, so I may be wrong, but you have a very deep faith and trust. And I really hear you talking about surrendering to God, or being God, thy will be done. And so I think I see that in each of us as we try to work with living the divine of who we are in this only moment. Mary, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but that's my perception. Would you speak to that from your perspective?
I'll just say that listening to Peeyush, and thank you, mahalo Peeyush, there's such a universality of trying to find our way. What is our purpose in life? And to do goodness only, do no harm. So that's what I take from this. And so far as, I don't meditate, but I pray deeply. And that to me is very similar. I don't know, it's just semantics. It's just a name for the same thing. And in the quiet is when you hear the message that you're supposed to hear. Amen.
Beautiful. Mary, just to put you a little bit more on the spot, can you give us an example of one of those messages? I don't know whether it can even be put into words, but
I'll try.
Okay.
I belong to a charismatic group of Catholics, and it's the basic Christian community of Hawaii. We have retreats. It's how many years now? It's almost, I think, 30 years. I've been in it for over 20. And we have a time when we have an anointing. And one of the most impactful times was when I received the blessing. And what came to my mind was to rest. It wasn't a voice I heard, it was just an impression. And it was to rest in the Lord, rest in his goodness, rest in his love. So that's my story. Amen.
oh, so beautiful. Thank you so much. Who else? I suspect every single one of you has had these experiences. Peeyush is nodding.
Sometimes I believe these experiences happen in a microsecond, they just last within that millisecond, where there's just a sense of, like I was just holding this belief and this perception, but just in that millisecond, I was just shown for just that millisecond, a very different quality of the energy, or sometimes it's more formal than that. It could be an image, it could be a belief or something, but sometimes it's just a sudden feeling where it's like that expression of taken aback. Like that's what I believe is that experience of that inner eye, or in some sense, it's like taken aback, like just settling into my pineal gland just for that millisecond. And I believe probably everyone on the earth have had multiple experiences of that many times.
I think so.
I definitely had one of those experiences a couple of years ago, and I've been chasing enlightenment my entire life since I was 14. And then 2 years ago, I just suddenly stopped, and I lost my sense of self, as it were. And that has persisted to this very day. And the quality of that experience hasn't changed at all in the past 2 years. It's very persistent. But at the same time, I'm just musing and I'm quiet because I wouldn't know the first thing about how to communicate my experience to others. And so I never have much to say. I'm kind of at a loss for words around it. But yeah, I definitely agree with this idea of an inner wisdom guiding. I find all of my actions are really filled with love and compassion everywhere I go. And also just maintaining this temple of my body and caring about it is so much easier now that I can hear myself and I don't have so many maybe impressions. I think Peeyush, you were mentioning the word impressions. I really resonate with that. I feel like I can hear through them, and a wisdom comes out that says, love yourself, take care of yourself, type of an experience. So yeah, thanks for calling on me, Renée.
Yes. How about Bob?
Well, I wanted to share a story similar to what was said during the presentation of Shiva meditating. And my understanding of the Shaivite tradition is that Shiva is not only the destroyer, but also the creator and the preserver. So he was meditating, and his consort comes up behind him and very playfully puts her hands over his eyes. And as she does so, the world starts to disappear and dissolve. And then she quickly takes the hands away, and the world comes back. And for me, the idea of the absolute and the intimate are so related that part of my experience in meditation is that inner eye is also it's the connection to the world, but also the non-separation, so that, the cry of a bird is completely non-separate. It's just the cry of the bird. It's not me hearing it. So anyway, I find that very encouraging. I don't know if that's what the inner eye is about, but it creates our whole world, and it's our experience. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thank you. How about Skylar?
Yeah, I really enjoyed just listening, honestly, to what is being said here. I'm on Maui right now, visiting my grandfather-in-law, who is going to be turning 99. And yeah, just thinking about that, thinking about our existence here, and then we transition to something else. And the sort of like the waves. I think another person was talking about like different lives, the waves of being and not being, and the really beautiful cycle of that, and and yeah, that sense of divine cutting through it. The idea of form, as Peeyush was talking about, this sort of form is that thing that can be created and destroyed, right? Whereas that sense of infinite is completely untouched by any of that life, death, etc. And I think I experienced that most when I could actually, ironically, through this separation of the thoughts and impressions, in my mind, when I can meditate and when I can like sort of come back to that. And for me, I like the imagery of the roots of a tree versus the branches. Sometimes we feel like we're a leaf that's just being tussled constantly by the wind, but we are, but we're also that entire tree, which is connected to all the other trees, which is the earth, right? And that's not, that's completely unmoved by any sort of wind or storm or sunny day either. So yeah, when I can become the observer of my own thoughts and notice, without being swept away to any sort of emotion, joy as much as sadness, or, good as much as evil, right? These are both distinctions. And that's why, yes, it's one of those tough ones because, yeah, I do feel like there's a path for me in life. I do feel like there's purpose, but I also feel like all of that is still me identifying. And that's not the true source consciousness, which is that like everything that is. And that we actually don't really have control. We just, have these concepts. And when I can like let that go and just exist and observe the concepts in my mind without judging it, is for me the third eye, that forever consciousness that just pierces through everything.
Wow, that is a great way for us to put a little wrap on this. And we are going to have, for those of us who want to stay on and have the chance to experience the guided meditation by Peeyush, we will have that opportunity. I'm going to let you know what's going on next week. And I'm hoping that one of you will be able to give us a vote of thanks for Peeyush. And then we'll move on to those who need to leave, and those who can stay on for the guided meditation will stay. So next week, very appropriately, moving from the concept of Shiva, who's often pictured in a ring of flames, we are moving to the week of the fire of enthusiasm. And enthusiasm, we're told, means to be God-filled. Cool, isn't it? So we're going to move to the week of the fire of enthusiasm. And it seemed really appropriate to look to the artistic tradition for that. And so we have a wonderful artist who's a sculptor. She spoke to us briefly. She had brought a guest with her who was a person of the Falun Gong who had been imprisoned by the Chinese. And that's a Joanna Schweiger. And she's a sculptor. And she's going to speak to us from the artistic tradition on this idea of tending that fire of enthusiasm. And for her, that's very much a sacred act. So I think we have a lot to look forward to next week, as well as this beautiful presentation and conversation we had this week. Is there someone who would like to give a vote of thanks to Peeyush?
What the vote of thanks tradition is here. But, I really feel like I'm so lucky to learn about all these different wisdom traditions. Yes. And, everybody else coming from here with their own wisdom tradition and putting together. It's just, talk about differentiation and oneness. Really beautiful talk. Thank you so much, Peeyush.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so we'll have the potential parting of the ways if you need to go. And if you'd like to stay, which I do, we'll get to hear the guided meditation by Peeyush.
Mahalo, and thank you everyone for being here. We'll do a very short version of this meditation, just in the interest of time, but I hope with that experience, if that meditation speaks to you, then it can open up that space for you as well. In the again, in the Kashmiri Shaivism tradition, there is a class of meditations called Laya Yoga or Laya meditation, which is essentially listening to our inner sound. And this particular meditation will start with the Laya meditation and get into a more deeper sense of meditation here. I will, just in about 30 seconds, I'll describe the steps to that meditation because there's a few things to it, and then, we'll get into it. So the very first step would be basically feeling a body and getting a body, getting back into a body in a way, and finding the roots of a body. As I love the image that Skylar was talking about, feeling, like the body being the tree where the roots go deep down. So essentially, that's something that's the kind of thing we will be cultivating for the first couple of minutes. And from there, we'll invite a Laya meditation that will allow us to sort of like move beyond some of the day-to-day impressions and start feeling a pineal gland, a third eye. And then from there, and up till that point, it'll be a guided meditation. And after that, there'll be a space for self-meditation, and that'll be the last maybe 5 or so minutes. And that would be the experience that hopefully will bring this all back together. It's a very quick meditation today, but hopefully it'll give you an idea here. So in order to come back to ourselves, we'll just start connecting with a breath. So taking a deep breath in and just releasing. So it's just all about release right now. Deep sighs are a beautiful way for us to just get back into the body and calm down the nervous system if there's any tension in the body. Just noticing it. No change here. Just a deep breath and a release. And then another one. Inhale and then exhale. And this next time when we inhale, we'll do it a little bit more controlled. So deep inhale and deep exhale through the mouth slowly. And then another one. And we'll start bringing our awareness to different parts of the body. And we'll do something called a body scan. So we'll just start by noticing our toes and just increasing the tension in our toes a little bit and then releasing. And we'll continuously do that throughout our body. And we'll do a relatively quick body scan here. So noticing our toes, tensing the toes a little bit, maybe both toes, and releasing. Now we'll go up to the calves. So we'll start with the left calf, tensing the left calf, releasing it. And trying to synchronize this with the breath as much as possible. No requirement, but that helps. Moving up to our thighs, the back of the thighs, tensing it and releasing it on the left leg. And then going back to the right calf, tensing the right calf and releasing it. Going up to the thighs, the right thigh, tensing it, releasing it. Noticing our torso a little bit. The glutes, so the left glute, tensing and releasing. The right glute, tensing and releasing. Our stomach, the lower abdomen, the lower side of the stomach, tensing and releasing. Lower back, tensing and releasing. Middle back, tensing and releasing. Upper back, tensing and releasing. The chest, tensing and releasing. A left shoulder, tensing and releasing. A left forearm, tensing and releasing. The biceps, tensing and releasing. The right forearm, tensing and releasing. Right biceps, tensing and releasing. Our neck, tensing and releasing. And then just the entire quick tensing in the body, the whole body, and then releasing. And feeling the muscles in a phase and tensing that, the entire muscles in a phase and releasing. And then again, taking a deep breath in and releasing. And just starting to becoming aware of the root of the spine, because that's where our roots are. And that's the roots that go deep down into the earth. That's the point of groundedness. And if you cannot feel the base of your spine, then you can gently place one finger at the base of your spine to invite and to allow you to feel that space, feel that space. And this is the Muladhara chakra. Continuing to breathe, deep inhale all the way to the base of the spine and releasing. And we'll sit here for about 30 seconds. Continuing to build roots deep down into the earth like a tree. Deep inhale and deep exhale. And now we'll raise our arms and gently place the middle two fingers, the middle finger and the ring finger, on our eyes with the thumbs open, and we'll use our thumbs to press down into our ears. So closing our eyes and closing our ears. So just inviting a more container, a more space for us to be inside. And when we are in that place, we'll make a low hum sound. We will sound Om, but you might want to sound something else. But this is a sound just for yourself. So we'll sound this low hum sound of Om. And notice the vibrations of that sound as it lands in the back of our head, in that pineal gland area, the third eye. And we'll do it about 3 times. And after the third time, we'll sit in silence with that. Oh. 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 And we'll very gently bring our awareness on the top of our head, the top of our crown, maybe 2 inches above that, and settle into that space with the consciousness there. This would be a silent meditation for the next 5 minutes, noticing all the impressions that come in, not associating with that, letting those impressions go. Some impressions will have a lot of pull, and This is the practice of being in non-attachment, practice of seeing reflection in the cosmic mirror. And whenever we find our mind wandering and losing the focus, we can always come back to that sound of the Om. We can always bring back the fingers into our eyes and sound of Om. The invitation is to continue being in this meditation, if you will. And for this time, we'll bring this to a close. And invitation is to continue sitting if you feel like. Mahalo, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Bye.